You're listening to the Life Purpose Advisor Podcast, episode 26.
But a lot of people get caught up in, this is what I do every day. I get up, I go to work, I take care of my family, I watch TV, I go to bed. And they don't think of there being a purpose beyond, just living life.
You're listening to the Life Purpose Advisor Podcast.
Life purpose, spirituality, higher calling, personal growth, meaningful life.
We ask the deep questions about living a balanced life of meaning, purpose, and joy.
Passion, know thyself, be mindful, spiritual practice, aha moments, life lessons, balance.
It is time to welcome your host, Angie Swartz.
Today it's my great pleasure to welcome Mark Lovett to the show. Mark Lovett is the organizer and the chief architect for TEDx San Diego, an event that connects speakers and performers to local attendees each year at Symphony Hall. Mark is an entrepreneur in residence with Connect's Springboard program and sits on a number of advisory boards for local companies. Mark has been an executive in the high-tech electronics industry for the past 30 years and has a deep interest in global patriotism. Hello, Mark. How are you?
I am doing wonderful, Angie. Thank you.
My pleasure. It's very nice to have you come on the show today. Thanks for making the time.
My pleasure.
So you're doing some different things these days. You're interested in global patriotism since I met you, and you do all these other wonderful things in the high-tech industry. And I'd like to talk about all of those, but you're the organizer of TEDx San Diego. What does that mean for you?
Well, it means a lot of work, but it also means a lot of satisfaction, as we have a great team of folks who spend the majority of the year putting together our program, which happens in the fall. And it's an opportunity to feature 15 speakers and performers who are all bringing forward ideas worth spreading to our local San Diego audience.
And that takes place on a Saturday afternoon, all day?
It's a Saturday afternoon. The event itself is from 1 p.m. until about 6:15, but we open up 2 hours early outside on the street. And by that I mean that we block off B Street between 7th and 8th Avenue and create what we call Innovation Alley. And Innovation Alley is a venue outside of the theater where we construct 20 exhibit areas and have 20 of San Diego's most creative and entrepreneurial companies come down and show off what they're working on.
Very exciting. Very exciting. Can you list a few names that you've had exhibit there in the past?
One of the companies we had last year was called Hush, and they're building a very innovative ear plug that helps people that have sleeping disorders. And what was fun about them is not only their product, but the fact that they launched a Kickstarter campaign just a few weeks after our TEDx event, and they've raised over $500,000 to develop their product line. So
wow.
It's those kind of companies that we want to expose to local San Diegans, and the common reaction from people on the street was that they had no idea this kind of innovation was going on in their own backyard. So that was very fun.
Sounds great. Sounds really great. So your forte has always been having a high interest in promoting local entrepreneurial companies. Where does that come from in your background?
That comes from the fact that many years ago, I was brought in to a local startup company in the high-tech electronics field. We were building specialized computer systems for industrial automation and telecommunication and internet applications. So I got to be part of that startup, a company that we grew very successfully. We sold that company. We then merged it with another company and sold off that merged entity. So I've been through some mergers and acquisitions. I've helped grow these companies. And as I got later on in my career, I decided to become an entrepreneur in residence with Connect's Springboard program, which is a organization that helps startup companies get ready for funding. So we help entrepreneurs put together a business plan and validate their marketing models and their financial plans. And so it's always been exciting for me to see these young, bright-eyed folks with brand new ideas and help them bring it to market.
Mm-hmm. Makes a big difference. I'm sure your contribution is priceless when a company is that small and looking for resources and advisors.
The advice we give tends to be kind of a catalyst. So it helps launch people to that next level. But the companies that survive are the ones that have that perseverance where they're going to take that little bit of wisdom that we impart and they're really going to run with it. And that's where it's fun to see companies that continue to grow and thrive here in town.
Mm-hmm. In your opinion and your experience with working with entrepreneurs, what do you think the approximate investment in years is for a company to kind of get on its feet and be up and running as a more mature company?
That varies quite a bit, actually. Kind of classic that it takes 3 to 5 years for a company to gain a foothold and really get some traction with their product and service. But on occasion, you'll find a company that succeeds not right out of the gate, but pretty close afterwards, especially in this new market where there's a lot of innovation going on in the software space, so that people who can come up with a unique software platform that fills a need can see a very quick uptake. I think a prime example of that is a local company called Take Lessons. It matches people who want to take various lessons, whether that be yoga training or learning how to play the piano, and matches them up to teachers. Things that used to be done via advertising or, the yellow pages was automated, and it became a very rapid success.
And Take Lessons is a great example because they started as a music company, didn't they?
Mm-hmm.
And then expanded their business model as they saw what the market could bear with it. So a good example of taking the ball and running with what the market needs.
And that is classic now with software as a service, where you can identify one market niche that you really want to focus on, and should you be successful, you can use that exact same platform to expand into other markets very rapidly.
Yeah, the world is certainly changing. Certainly changed in the 30 years that you've been doing high-tech business.
Absolutely. When we were building our first computers, those were back in the days with MS-DOS. And we
What was that? What is that?
And we actually marketed our computers through a catalog because there was no internet browser back in the 80s. So there was no internet other than a basic fabric to transport email, but there were no websites when we started selling computers.
Yeah, it's really profound to think about how young the internet actually is.
Very young, and yet it's revolutionized every industry.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Let's go back to TEDx and TED in general. Just from talking to you in our pre-call, I know that you are very involved in other events. What does that landscape look like for you, being an organizer for a local event, and how does that give you exposure to different areas at the more national level and other TED events in other cities?
Well, it's an interesting infrastructure that most people don't understand because it's not widely talked about. And that is that the TED organization itself has been around for 30 years. And it was only about 5 or 6 years ago that they decided to allow their model of having speakers up on stage for a short period of time to be used on a local level. And when they created what is now known as TEDx, and the X just stands for independently produced, they thought maybe a couple hundred people would take them up on that offer. And as of last summer, they've had over 11,000 TEDx events all around the world, I think in 160 different countries. So on an average, there's something like 8 or 9 TEDx's going on every day of the year somewhere in the world.
Wow.
So as a TEDx organizer, I've been able to interact with a number of other organizers, some of them in the Southern California region. So I will attend other events such as TEDx Venice Beach, which I'm actually going to this Sunday. Last fall, I went to TEDx Manhattan Beach. I've been to TEDx Malibu, even TEDx Skid Row, which was very interesting.
TEDx Skid Row, what is that?
That was an event put on by Robert Gupta, who is a violinist for the LA Philharmonic Orchestra. And he's actually put together, I think it's called Street Symphony, where members of the symphony go out into Skid Row and play symphonic music because of music's ability to heal people and connect with people and resonate with people. And he put on this event in an old warehouse that had been converted to a local neighborhood theater. And it was very small, which is another aspect of TEDx, that the events can be small to large. His event was 100 people, and he brought together professionals who were working in Skid Row and talking about the challenges of how to deal with the homeless population in Los Angeles.
Amazing. Amazing. And I know you've been to other events. You've been to national events as well.
Well, when they put on the main TED event, which happens each year at the beginning of the year, that's actually happening next month. And it used to be in Long Beach. Before that, it was in Monterey, California. And last year, they moved it to Vancouver in Canada. And there's a parallel conference that goes on at the same time called TED Active. And TED Active is where a lot of the organizers from around the world go. And we get to watch all of the TED Talks as they happen live. And it's a 5-day event. So you see a lot of TED Talks. And you also get to interact with the other organizers. So that's a real treat in that you get to trade best practices and find out what people are doing in other parts of the world, from TEDx Sydney or Singapore on the one hand, to very different TEDx's occurring in places like Mogadishu, Tehran, and Beirut.
Wow. It's a big commitment, it sounds like, for you. Like it's a very big part of your life to be the organizer of TEDx San Diego, but it goes beyond our local event. Where does that passion for this event come from?
Well, the tagline for TED, which filters down to TEDx, is ideas worth spreading. And the focus is really to bring forth thought leaders, innovators, people with personal stories that can be shared with a wider audience. And that's always been a passion of mine, the ability to educate both myself and other people, to expose people to unique ideas, to have methodologies that allow us to improve society. So when I first came across TED, it was just a natural affinity to the mission that they're on.
And prior to that, I've interviewed Mark previously on other radio shows years ago, and we talked about your interest in global patriotism. Can you just talk a little bit about that for the people that are listening today?
Well, global patriotism for me, and it's kind of exemplified in the tagline, which is patriotism without borders, speaks to our need to dedicate our lives and our actions to supporting the health and well-being of the entire planet. This has been occurring over the past few decades as the world has become, in the words of one famous author, very, very flat, so that everything is now connected. And not only from a standpoint of being able to travel and meet other people, but in the ways that commerce is conducted, and also in the way that how we treat the planet affects everywhere else. I mean, we're now able to detect pollution from China in the air that's now coming over America. So even if we think we're exporting pollution or exporting some other problem, at the end of the day, we're all connected and it comes back to us. So I think the days of when we could be patriotic to just one ideology or just one country, just one religion, just one philosophy, I think those days are over. And if we can't figure out how to embrace each other on a global basis, we'll continue to see problems such as climate change become worse.
It's a great connection and a great illustration of how when you have an interest and you point your life in a direction, something shows up that aligns directly to give you a bigger voice, which is what seems like what has happened with you with TEDx, and because those two things seem very closely aligned to each other.
They are closely aligned, and To be honest, I never had any intent of becoming involved with TED or TEDx. It was the matter of a friend of mine who started TEDx San Diego kind of pulling me into his orbit. And the more I got into it, the more I enjoyed it, saw its value, and became involved. And he invited me to be a co-organizer in 2013. And then I took on the license in 2014 to put on the event for the first time, with my own team. And that concept of ideas worth spreading really does align with Patriotism Without Borders. Because when you show up at a conference like TED Active, what's amazing is that on the one hand, there's people there from all over the world. But in essence, there is no religion, there is no ethnicity, there is no country boundary. Everybody there is talking about one common goal, how their event supports ideas worth spreading. So you can be talking to somebody and you're not even conscious of the fact that they live halfway around the world because you're kind of on the same wavelength. So that synergy that started with global patriotism did lead into TEDx just by happenstance.
And we'll see where you go next. I would imagine that if you were to align, maybe someone's already done this, but if you were to align all of the TEDx talks beside each other and look at them topically, that we're talking about the same important subjects at each conference around the world, which goes back to what you said about the world being very connected and we're all one. And so it seems to me to be a very almost spiritual way to spread the golden rule almost.
It is, because the golden rule of do unto others, as I mentioned previously, and how we're all connected, it does come back and affect you. So everything that you put out there does come back around. And I've always felt that global patriotism kind of sits at this intersection of human rights and sustainability. And if you look at a lot of TED Talks, they will touch on one or both of those topics, so that there are a lot of people who are bringing forth issues related to human rights problems or climate change problems or sustainability problems around the world. And then another layer of talks that are all about technology and innovation. So you'll oftentimes see scientists or researchers from universities talking about the latest technology in areas such as neuroscience, where we're gaining an understanding of the brain, or genomics, where we're figuring out exactly what we're built of.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. You and I have talked about this before, that the triangle convergence of physics and spirituality and business are moving closer and closer together every year. It's a really miraculous thing to think about. And to imagine what the world is going to be like in as soon as 10 years.
Yeah, I think the next 10 years are going to be more revolutionary than people can even imagine at this.
I agree. I agree for sure.
Because you are bringing together science and business and spirituality. And I think the kind of common overlay there is all of the research being done in the area of consciousness, which if you talk to any scientist or medical practitioner, at the end of the day, they really don't know what consciousness is. And it's becoming the most fascinating subject of what it is to be human and what makes us tick. And part of that is what goes on in the brain. Part of that's what goes on in our heart. And there's just a lot of exploration going on in those areas.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And things out there like heart math that tell us that those things, the brain and the heart, are perhaps not so separate. And we also see in pop culture today the movies that we're seeing in the theaters, like Interstellar and The Theory of Everything about Stephen Hawking's life. And, you know, even a year ago, The Tree of Life, which was a little bit different path. But these thoughts are becoming very mainstream. I find it very exciting, very stimulating.
It is stimulating. And at the same time, it's kind of ironic that it has been around in one form or another for quite some time. In fact, one of my personal heroes is Albert Einstein. And I'll probably get this quote a little bit wrong, but in effect, he said that his quest in life was to understand the mind of God. All else are just details. Mm-hmm. So he kind of knew intrinsically that when he was developing his, work in quantum theory, that he was trying to understand how the universe was built all the way from the Big Bang forward, and that this had some sort of intelligence beyond what we could construct in a mathematical formula. And that was kind of the mystery that he wanted to explore more than anything else.
Yeah, it's really just amazing. I hope in our lifetime we'll be able to look back at a map that shows how all of these, when the beginning of the understanding started, and how that flows out into a big fan of global understanding. But we'll see if that happens or not. Your work is so interesting, but I would like to take our conversation in the direction a little bit more personally about you, if you're okay with that now.
Sure.
So what do you think your own life purpose is?
Well, I think my life purpose is kind of unfolded in various segments. And so I don't think that I have one purpose that I see and understand, and this is what I'm pursuing. I've watched my life progress through a lot of business opportunities and transactions. And I've seen some core skills that I've developed and utilized along the way, where I'm less of a specialist in any one thing. I'm more of a generalist. But my abilities are in strategic thinking and in team building and in execution, so that I've been able to dive into a number of different positions. I've been a vice president of operations, a chief information officer, a CEO, a chief marketing officer, consultant. And at every turn, I've been faced with challenges of I don't understand a certain technology or a certain expertise that well. But I'm able to apply these basic principles of putting together a team of experts, of mapping out a strategy and executing on that. But I've seen that shift over the past few years as I've spent more time outside of the general business world. This transition into global patriotism as well as TEDx has utilized those same skills, but now it's reaching a far greater audience. Now you can produce a video from a TEDx event, such as one we did a couple of years ago with a gentleman named Matt Immersion, and he's had nearly 300,000 views of his video. A very impactful story that he told on stage. And now you can see that what you're doing can affect tens or hundreds of thousands of people around the globe, not just a small team of people within a company I'm working at. So I'm kind of having fun watching my own purpose evolve. And I think over the next couple of years, I will be surprised at where that heads.
Mm-hmm. Me too. I can't wait to see, Mark. If you had to put it in one sentence today, would you be able to do that? As you stand today on the day that we're talking, knowing that you are an evolving being.
If I had to summarize it concisely, I would say that I'm becoming a catalyst for change.
Nice. I see that in you every time I see you and speak with you, Mark. It's very apparent. Can you talk about a few aha moments that have gotten you to the point of realization that that's what your purpose is?
Well, I think at each turn in my business career, there have been these aha moments of looking back and seeing something that was accomplished that at one point in time seemed to be insurmountable, or I didn't have a vision as to how it was going to come to fruition. And again, by putting together teams and mapping out strategies, I see myself as more of that catalyst or even a facilitator, where in many cases I'm not the one doing the heavy lifting, so to speak. It's the people around me, but I'm able to guide them and take us on a journey in that direction. So whether it was the first startup that I worked with, the transactions of selling that company, of doing later mergers, some of the consulting work that I've done, those were all moments when I realized what was possible with the right framework around it. Rather than I have to know all the answers, it's more about I need to map a vision from point A to point B.
Mm-hmm. Which is quite heavy lifting, if you ask me. I know that you're quite a modest man and always promoting those around you, but I know that you've done a fair amount of heavy lifting at that senior level to clear a pathway for the others to do the work they need to do. How about personally? Have there been any things that happened in your life personally that hinted or pushed you in a certain direction?
Well, I think a couple of events that have turned out to be pivotal in my life. This goes back to when I was 16 years old, and a friend handed me a book, said, "You have to read this." And it was Autobiography of a Yogi by Paramahansa Yogananda. And for those who are unfamiliar with his story, he was a very wise and spiritual person in India who came to the United States and founded Self-Realization Fellowship. In reading of his journey and his own awakening, it was a very powerful story for me to read. And it was maybe a year or two later that I ran into a book called The Tao of Physics by Frijaf Capra. And in that book, he made comparisons between quantum physics and Eastern religion, some Buddhism, some Hinduism, some Taoism. And I found that to be fascinating, and I kind of locked on to this concept of life being this intersection of spirituality and quantum physics, that science would have one path, but there was another path within us that's innate to us, part of our spirit, that also explains life. And I think that stayed with me my entire life. I'm constantly fascinated by the discoveries internal with myself, as well as seeing the discoveries going on in the world of quantum physics and astrophysics.
So that brings us to talking about spiritual beliefs, which you sort of explained there, but if you could only describe your spiritual beliefs in one sentence, what would you say that they are?
Spiritual belief in one sentence.
That's an easy question, isn't it?
The common or easiest answer would be, we're all connected. And that's a very common phrase that you hear a lot of times, and it's become even a little bit trite because it's been repeated so many times. But if I take that concept of we're all connected all the way back to the Big Bang, there's really this point in time where truly all matter and all energy in the entire universe existed in one point, that scientists call the point of singularity. And so when you look at how the Earth was formed, where every atom and molecule on our planet came from stars that burn out in distant galaxies, you really come to realize that we're connected to the universe in a very fundamental way, down to that molecular, down to that atomic level. And so my fascination with spirit is wondering how that plays into it all. It's very easy to examine the tangible world. You can examine things under a microscope. But so far, we're not able to examine either consciousness or spirituality under a microscope. You can't define its structure. So that's kind of my quest in life, is to understand more of how spirit interacts with the universe.
Well, I'm certainly going to stay tuned to see what you figure out on that topic. I am honored to call you a friend and to be able to call on you to learn from you.
I'm just stumbling through life like everybody else, but I'm happy to share anything that I come across.
Well, I don't know about that, Mark, but we'll see. Let's talk about tools. Over the years, have you used any tools to know yourself better? You talked about books, but have you used anything else? Any personality assessments or experiences with your bosses or people that you worked with?
Well, I would say one of my traditions, if you will, from early on is just a lot of introspection, of really thinking about who I am and what my thought process is and how I operate, almost to the point of approaching it as an out-of-body experience. So I've been in many situations, especially tumultuous ones, where there's a lot of activity or there's a lot of emotion, even anger, in the situation. And to be able to disconnect from that and simply examine what's actually going on and try to understand what other people are going through, what their emotions are, what their motivations are, and to try to understand how I can best serve in that situation. And that's kind of a technique I've been using for a long time, and it's served me quite well. It kind of connects to meditation practice, which is much the same thing, where you're trying to disconnect from the emotional side of life and really come to an understanding of who you are.
Mm-hmm. And would you call that a daily practice, or is there something that you do, or it's just a state of being that you're in now?
I try to approach it as a state of being. And, there's a lot going on today. You hear this quite a bit about awareness and mindfulness, which both kind of come from this Buddhist philosophy. And I think being mindful, which is simple in the fact that it's just this one phrase, is very complex when you actually try to put it into practice. But to be mindful of where you are and your surroundings and the people that you're dealing with and really be aware in the present moment, that's something that I try to bring into my life as much as possible rather than a structured practice. It's more a sense of this is how I want to be.
Very inspiring. How about the physical body? Do you think our physical body plays a role in that awareness and how you treat it and interact with it?
Without question. Our physical body is where we live. And so there are some theories that would say, well, the body is just this kind of mechanism that's operating, and who we are is really in our spirit or our consciousness. But the body is this very complex mechanism, with all these chemical compounds running through it. We're discovering so much these days about neuroscience so that we're seeing how the brain operates and understanding how each of us is very different in our decision-making capability, in our emotional composition, that the body, what we put in it, the exact materials, whether they be healthy or junk food, whether they be organic or be some kind of a, drug or stimulant, how your body reacts to everything you put in it and everything you do to it is connected to the mind, and I think by extension connected to your spirit.
So for you personally, do you exercise? Do you spend time in nature? What do you do for your body?
A combination of things. Meditation is one, in which calming the body is an aspect of that. Yoga, which I connect very much to meditation, in that it's a movement of the body, but being done in a very mindful way. In fact, I was recently at an all-day meditation, which was a combination of sitting meditation, standing meditation, and walking meditation. And you really come to see that connection between the body and the mind, especially when you're not sitting. When you're standing or walking, then you can kind of see that connection into yoga and into body movements. And nature, of course, is always a big part of things. We're so blessed living in San Diego that if we need to see some trees, that's an hour away. And in my case, if I want to see the beach, it's about 10 minutes away. And so walking on the sand and listening to the ocean has always been a very meditative, high quality part of life.
We're very lucky. I just purchased a pass to be in Torrey Pines all year long so that you can, even sometimes parking is a challenge there, but just knowing that you can drive up the hill and get out and spend some time up there, do a little walking meditation is a goal for me for this year, because it's a place that sometimes we can take for granted because we live here, as you said. Mm-hmm. Just delicious stuff to talk about. Can I ask you a lightning round of yes or no short answer questions?
Sure.
Do you think passion and purpose are the same things?
Not at all, but it's fabulous when they do intersect.
Do you think everybody has a life purpose?
I think we're all here for a purpose, which could be a series of lessons, but we may not recognize what that is.
We may not recognize what the purpose is.
Right.
This is short answer, but what do you think keeps us from recognizing that?
I think it has to be something that you consciously want to know and that you want to pursue that, and that you recognize it's not an easy answer and it could actually take you years to uncover that. And in my case, I've watched it change and alter over time. But a lot of people get caught up in this is what I do every day. I get up, I go to work, I take care of my family, I watch TV, I go to bed. And they don't think of there being a purpose beyond, just living life.
Mm-hmm. Well said. On a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being high, how important is following your joy and igniting your purpose?
That's a 9.
Did you ever quit your job to follow your purpose, and do you think somebody needs to quit?
I have quit my job on a number of occasions. That's an interesting question as to whether it was to follow my purpose. In one case, after we had sold our company, I spent a year traveling around the United States, from San Diego to Alaska to Cape Cod to Florida. And it was kind of a lifelong dream of doing a trip like that. And I knew that it would change me and enrich me. I didn't think about it being my purpose, but in hindsight, it definitely fed into how my purpose has evolved.
Doesn't everything, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Really, when it comes right down to it. Do you think somebody needs to quit their job?
Not necessarily, but I would venture to say that in 90% of the cases, yes.
Thank you. What brings you great, great joy?
People. There's just no greater joy than interacting with people in so many different levels, from a business perspective to watch people grow and learn and their careers develop, to interact with people who are masters of the arts. I mean, great joy in music and art and drama.
Yes, you're a big jazz fan, correct?
Yeah. When you see a great jazz concert, it's amazing. In fact, I was listening to a song that my son was playing me this morning. There's a bass player named Nathan East, who's like one of the most prolific bass players imaginable. And he just produced his very first album. He's been on over 2,000 albums, and he made his own album for the first time. And one of his covers was Moon Dance by Van Morrison. Mm-hmm. But he had Michael McDonald do the vocals on it.
Beautiful.
And this song starts out just so sublime and sedate with just Michael McDonald singing. And then this huge big band kicks in with horns and drums. And I'm a big fan of big bands and swing music. So it was just miraculous to experience what a musician is able to put forth. To me, that's one of the magic pieces in life that if I could redo my purpose, it would probably be to be a musician.
I would love to see you as a musician. I think you might make that in this lifetime still. But where could we listen to that song?
That's a good question. You just look up Nathan East. It's a brand new album that he just came out with. I was fortunate enough to see him a couple of weeks ago. He came to town at the La Jolla Museum of Contemporary Art, and they actually showed a film that was a documentary of making the album. And they interview all of these people that he's played with around the world. So they're talking to people like Eric Clapton and just this long list of folks, Phil Collins, and the list goes on of people that he's played with. So if you look up Nathan East, you'll find his album.
Yeah. Well, we'll check Amazon and iTunes. I'm sure it's out there somewhere. Mm-hmm. One more lightning round question for you. If you unexpectedly amassed a good-sized fortune, what would you do differently?
Well, I think the dream in the back of my mind is creating the Global Patriot Foundation and being able to spread that idea of patriotism without borders on a global basis. I think it's a message that could impact people tremendously, and I would put a great deal of money towards that.
Well, I feel like that's going to come true in this lifetime, so I can't wait to see it. Just in closing, Mark, what should listeners learn from your life?
It's partly following your passion, but also exploring new avenues that you may not even consider as part of your passion. I have found that the more things that I have done, the more things I've tried, the more people I've met, the more classes I've taken, that other things, many times years down the road, unfold in a very miraculous fashion. And I can look back as a new opportunity is handed to me at everything I had done in the previous 5 years, and I could see this matrix of actions and intents and knowledge coming together to allow that one point in time to manifest. And so I would tell people to always approach life with a sense of exploration.
Mm. And do you have any personal growth recommendations for anyone that's listening that might be feeling a spark from listening to our conversation today? Where can they start?
Well, I always recommend that people be engaged and, be in that mode of exploration. And so for each person, it may be a different path. I know people who listen to books on tape or, audio books constantly so that they're exploring all kinds of different new avenues by listening to books. For other people, it's going back to school and taking extension classes. In my case, I happen to run into a lot of people who are big fans of TED and TEDx. So watching those videos has been able to stimulate their mind into brand new directions. And overall, just interact with people. I've never been one to just sit at home every night. If there's a networking event or a social gathering or an educational experience, I'm very quick to want to be involved in it because I know I'm going to run into a new person, a new idea. Two ideas are going to come together and become a third idea. That's just how life works. So be engaged.
Thank you. So let's just talk about TEDx San Diego again. I would love to talk you into offering a discount to attend the event this year, which I think you mentioned earlier is on October 17th, 2015.
That is correct. And we plan to have tickets on sale opening the registration process in the month of June. It may be June 1st or thereabouts.
And how many? What's the capacity?
Last year we cut off registration at 1,300, which is the capacity of the Symphony Hall venue floor. If we have increased demand this year, we have an option of opening the balcony, and we could have over 2,000 people attend this year.
But still not very many tickets for a big city like San Diego and a beautiful place like Symphony Hall.
No, not at all. There are a number of other events around the world that are of that stature. For example, TEDx Sydney holds their TEDx in the Sydney Opera House. And that capacity is 2,200 people, and they sell that out every year. So there are events, especially with a city of this size, that sell out rather quickly. So it has become a hot ticket, so to speak.
Right. So if you're interested in attending TEDx San Diego, this is the place to hopefully get a discount, right, Mark?
Exactly.
So what can you offer to our listeners?
Well, we can offer all of your listeners a 15% discount to the event, and we will actually, this is just a secret between you and I, we will have an early bird special in the month of June. So the month of June is the time to pay very close attention when for a limited time we will have a 25% discount.
Oh, wow. Okay, so for the 25% discount just in the month of June, you don't need any special code or anything like that?
We will announce a special code through our website, and people who want to stay informed as to everything about TEDx San Diego can go to TEDxSanDiego.com. And under the About tab, there is a contact form, and you can sign up for our newsletter. So the newsletter will talk about when registration is opening. It will be announcing some of our speakers and performers, and we've already got a number of very exciting people lined up for this year.
Are you at liberty to say that?
I'm not at liberty yet.
So you heard it here. If you want to know who's speaking, you have to go sign up for the TEDx San Diego newsletter at TEDxSanDiego.com.
Yep.
To stay in touch with what's going on there. So let me just make sure I understand this. So at a limited time in June, there will be a 25% off for anybody. But if someone happens to be listening to this show after June and after the early bird is over, you're going to offer a 15% off discount to them.
That's correct.
Do they need a code?
They do need a code, and when you go to the registration page, there will be a little box down there that's prompting you for a discount code if you happen to know that the discount code purpose will qualify you for that 15% discount.
And I dislike nothing more than going to an event and seeing that little box down there and not knowing the code, like knowing that there's one out there that exists, but that I don't have it. So thank you very much for that. I hope those of you listening will look into TEDx San Diego, look at some of the past people that have spoken there, and think about attending. It's a really amazing event and an opportunity to witness what Mark's put together. So thank you for that, Mark. And just going back to you, if someone wants to learn more about you personally, how could they do that?
Come to TEDx San Diego. You'll see what I'm up to. I'm open. I'm out there on LinkedIn and Facebook. Not a day goes by that I don't have somebody new getting a hold of me, so people know how to track me down.
Great. Well, I thank you very much for sharing your story today. Is there anything else that you'd like to say that we didn't cover?
I think we hit all the high points, and I would just emphasize that one concept of explore constantly and be mindful, be aware. You'll see your life unfold in very new ways.
Very nice. Thank you so much, Mark.
It's been my pleasure, Angie.
My pleasure as well. You've been listening to the Life Purpose Advisor podcast with my guest today, Mark Lovett. We've talked about TEDx San Diego. If you'd like more information about TEDx San Diego, please go to TEDxSanDiego.com. And if you'd like more information about finding your life purpose, please visit me at www.lifepurposeadvisor.com. And there's lots of resources there to help you. We will see you next time.